Hello there Reason people, PoohBear here and welcome to my channel. And today I thought I'd do a creative video just using Reason. It turned out I ended up using a lot of Reason and a lot of voltage modular within this particular project. I will also admit I had a lot of technical issues. I just started filming. I didn't realise my mouse wasn't being recorded, my mic had cut out halfway through, but because I had a couple of hours worth of footage which I was just filming during the evening, I thought, well, I'll just push it all together and I'll try and come up with something. And personally I think, yeah, this video does start off a little bit slow, but then later on I go into quite a little bit more detail about how I'm using my sequences and how I programmed them up and how I used things like the deltas and Kompulsion and other things, and obviously a bit of voltage modular. And then obviously I finish off totally improvising, so there's absolutely nothing in the sequencer. I just thought I'd just go along and come up with something for a bit of fun. So I hope you get something out of this video. Thank you. So I haven't really given Complex One much loving, so I thought I'd actually have a play around and come up with some sounds with this. Right, now here's a nice little trick. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be using Oscillator 3 as an LFO. We've got an LFO here, but the advantage of, well, what I like to do with this particular oscillator is down here we've got this mixer section. If you don't have anything plugged in, you can obviously use these as like a constant value. So I've put this into a negative value. I'm going to take the output, I'm going to put it into the pitch, and even though I'm going to drag the pitch right down, by pushing this in, we can drag it even slower. So we can really overdrive this oscillator and slow it right down. In fact, if you go down to -1, this oscillator stops. I was trying to monitor it on the look on the mixer, but I'm pretty sure after several hours it hadn't even moved. So by putting it to -1, it really does stop. As you can see, we've slowed it down and we're slowing it down some more, and I'd slow that down even more as well. And it's just going to change the shape ever so slightly. Let's give it a bit of echo. Fatten it up a little bit. I'm just going to bring in just a little bit of reverb and bring that in on a parallel channel. Hey, sounding good. I like that. Now, Algoritm is something I don't play with too much. So again, I'm going to try and have a little play with this now. I've actually come across this xylophone sound, which I rather like the sound of, but I've actually got my keyboard shifted an octave down or up, depending on which way you want to look at it. So, and I'm going to be playing a lot of high notes, and the problem with the xylophone is it down low, it's really nice. Up high, there's nothing to it, absolutely nothing to it. So let's combine it up, and I'm going to layer this up, and I'm going to do it with a Europa. So we're just going to build a very simple patch. Let's get the envelope sorted out, and let's get some filtering going. So that's sounding quite nice now. That high end is a lot better. Now the problem is if you hear that muted, you can still hear this, which I don't fully like. So that's it, you know, without the muted sound. Sounds all right, but there's two ways round how we can sort this out. One way would be just using the combinator, or even just using a player And we can say, well, above a certain note range, we're not going to even play the algorithm. We're going to just carry on playing the Europa. But there's actually another preferred method I like, is because I don't totally hate that sound what's coming through. It's just coming through too powerful for my liking. So I'm going to use a good old delta. I'm going to, obviously on the split point, so I've chosen my split point, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take that velocity and take it right down, which is going into here. So we're going to still get a little bit of the sound coming through, but we really are going to squash it right down. Let's give this a little bit of a reverb. Obviously that's actually too much reverb there. And let's try and fatten this up. Sounding good, sounding good. Right, so I think the next thing I'm going to do is quickly add a simple sequence to this complex patch we built earlier. Something really simple to do. If I'm going to be perfectly honest, that really does remind me of a Tangerine Dream track. So I'm just going to go and quickly check that out, because I say that's very close. This is the pattern, actually, from what I can gather from online, is what is actually used in that Tangerine Dream song I was thinking of, which is actually called Love on the Train, which is from Risky Business. This was my one. Now, actually, I like them both, so I think the best thing I can do is merge the two together. And I think I know where I'm going to be taking this little project. So we're going to have ourselves a little bit of piano sound going off in the background. And as I say, because I know where I'm going with this project already, I'm just going to record some simple chords in. I'm just going to quickly grab them out and expand them chords out. Sounding cool. Let's just split the sort of bassy line up a little bit, just to get a double thing going on. Oh, don't like that. So I'm going to make that one continuous bit. In fact, I'm going to take this one down and put an extra note on the end, so it's going to go ding ding. Yep, so let's actually do the same here, and I'm going to do the same on this one as well. And let's add some conditioning, and I'm going to have different conditioning on different notes. Let's just jump ahead a little bit. like it a lot. So I'm going to take that, we can duplicate that out. And I'm just going to play around with the very end bit. Again, let's get some conditioning put onto these end notes. So this is Voltage Modular, and I'm going to be using a very specific module inside it called Tiny Voice. And Tiny Voice is like a little mini synthesizer in its own right. It's got a couple of oscillators, it's got a filter built into it, it's got envelope for the filter, and it's also got an overall envelope as well. And you can get some quite nice sounds out of it. I've shifted it up an octave, and I've also added a strum machine on top of this as well. So after listening to that lot together, I've decided that my ARP is a little bit weak and I need to get that doubled up by using some bit of Voltage Modular. This is from the VM 900 series, which is obviously a very old modular rack from the 60s. So I'm just going to be using some sawtooths mainly. I'm going to mix them together. We're going to use a bit of a voltage control envelope so I can obviously change that on the fly. These are all slightly offset. Eye candy only. Right, so we're going to bring in an LFO. And this is an interesting bit. What I'm going to build over here is we're going to bring in a glide. But what we're going to actually do is, this is a flip-flop switcher, so this is like an A-B switch. And what we can do is we can bring the signal in as a dry signal, and randomly we're going to push the signal via the glide, or more to the point, the glide's also going to have the signal coming in. So we're going to have a dry signal, the glide coming in, and we're going to sort of switch between them, and we can go out to obviously our different oscillators. So every now and then we're going to put a small glide on the note randomly, hold it there just for a couple of notes, and then we're going to move on. And being that this is a flip-flop switcher, we've got this weight, so we can actually change the weights of the randomization, i.e. we can turn it one way so it's a lot more dry and only wet every now and then. Let's bring the original signal back in again. I bought the sound going through a straightforward mixer, so I also got the complex one and the Voltage Modular going through the mixer, just to balance it out a little bit, and then obviously that's then going off via the echo and the reverb. Rather like that, sounding quite good. So let's actually create ourselves a nice bass. Again, I'm going to use Voltage Modular as the first sort of layer. These are some box standard modules which come out of the core. They give quite the ladders. I like the ladder filters on these. These are quite a nice, give it a nice roughness, so that they make a great sort of bass sound. And being a bass, I'm going to be a bit naughty. I'm actually going to be putting a bit of reverb and a lot of echo on it as well, which is something you don't tend to do, but hey, for what I'm up to, that's what I wish to do. And I'm going to obviously lay it up, so I've got one going, I'm going to get this other one going as well. Yeah, that's sounding quite good. So, obviously I need a bass pattern. Again, I'm going to use good old Kompulsion. Let's get something drawn in. And I've done my classic of putting a spread on. So that means when I play a single note, 3 of these will equal 1 note. But I've gone on to S10 and I've made sure that isn't actually an octave higher. That looks quite good. Play around with the lengths. Give it a little bit of thickness. Right, I'm going to be adding this cyber sub to it to bring it up. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take, I'm going to drive this compulsion from that piano sequence that we put together. So I'm just going to be using my simple MIDI CV converters to actually transport it over. I stack them on top of each other so I can wire it up and then I can move one off. Obviously you can use the free CV tap if you wish to use that. So I can just drag that across over here. Now we can just obviously kick things off. So it's following this now. So this is my drum patch. It's quite complex, but also very, very straightforward. The kick has been generated by a filter, which has got obviously its resonance fully up, so it self-resonates. So I'm just using that as a kick. I've got myself a snare over here using the simple snare modules, and they're all being driven by my gators. And my gators can, you can have 1 gator or you can have 1,000 gators, and these are like the steps. So you can activate, a bit like on a redrum where you can sort of highlight the lights and say, hey, this is where I want it to go. Well, this, you're not limited to, you can have as many as you want, as your system can handle. We've got a little bit of hi-hat going on. I've got something what's called a flip-flop counter in between the steps as well. So for most of the time, I'm actually going to be playing this is going to be playing the snare, and then right on the 8th bar, I believe it's going to flip over and it's going to play this is the snare. So we've got ourselves a little bit of a drum roll at the very, very end. Right, just a quick amendment to the drums. We've got the clap sound, which is going on. And we've also got this like clave sound, which is going via this microburst, which is a bit like a ratchet. Big difference with this particular ratchet or microburst is I've got an envelope control in it, so I can speed it up as it goes through the sound. Makes it sound rather nice. Originally I had these randomized, but I've now got them assigned to my pads on my controller. So really your synthesizer more likely is going to be set up with a Volta module, though what we have to do, we have to come in and assign the actual controls to a parameter list, and then from in Reason we can obviously grab the controls from that. It's a bit like a combinator. You don't know what you're putting inside the combinator. Once you've got it inside the combinator, you can kind of program it up. It's exactly the same thing. So we assign the controls, and then from actually outside of Volta module itself, he says, we can come in and we can actually choose them. And what I'm actually doing is controlling it via this delta. So delta, I'm doing a capture of the keyboard because I'm playing my mod panel. I can take out the pads, which I'm actually playing. Here they are. They're output into their own separate outputs. So pad 1, pad 2 and pad 3. Go to pad 1, 2 and 3, as I say. And then on the front, we're controlling the actual buttons within inside Voltage Modular. Now Voltage Modular works, to operate a button inside Voltage Modular you need 2.5 volts. Reason that originally is working on from 0 to 1 volt, that's not a problem. It automatically gets converted when it goes into Voltage Modular, i.e. times by 5, but because it needs 2.5 and above, and when we hit say the pads gently, they'd be below 2.5 volts. So I set the base value to 49, which is like, I don't know, equivalent of around about 2.44 volts or whatever. So even if I hit my pads gently, it's going to only need to produce 0.015 of a volt, because I say it'd be times up by 5, so that'd be enough. So anyway, that's that bit. I'm going to be using another little bit of background noise, and I'm going to be using the Predator for this. Just going to use this simple patch, which it's got its own arpeggiator, but I like to play over the top of arpeggiators. It gives it a slightly different kind of feel. So I'll be playing with that in and out. I'm after some sort of choir sounds, so I'm going obviously to Vecto, which has got some really nice, what I refer to as 80s and 90s sort of choir sound. You could say they're quite harsh, especially compared to obviously a lot of ambient choir sounds we can acquire nowadays. I think some of the stuff you get obviously with Contact and that are absolutely brilliant, but I wanted some old school stuff. So I'm going to be using this sort of default patch here, this 90s ambient choir, which I rather like. But I'm going to overlay it with some devices, some Voltage Modular devices. This is what's called a micro stringer, which is, again, it's not like an all-in-one instrument, but it's doing quite a bit in one. We don't need to process it too much outside of it, so I just am just going to put a little bit of effect on it. I'm also going to be taking it and pushing it through these formant filters as well to give some quite nice sounds. Both together. So I'm going to be creating some sound effects, and I like to use noise for doing that. I've created myself an FX noise submix, so I'm going to be routing all my other channels into that. And in here I've actually put myself a maximizer because I'm going to be making a lot of noise. I'm using the Murf racks to actually do it, and I'm using different colors as well. And as you can see, I've pushed the output to that submix. So I've got a bit of green noise going on, I've got some white noise, I've got some pink noise. In the pink noise, I'm actually going to add myself like a Yoko band splitter, and then by using the little LFO, we're going to actually play around with the bands on the fly. So we're going to be turning them up and down, and that's the great thing what we can obviously do with little LFO. The other thing I want to do is I want the sounds coming in and out, and also panning from left to right. So the good advantage of the little LFO is it's already got built into it unipolar and bipolar signals. You need the bipolar signals for the panning, because you're going from minus to a plus, but you need the unipolar for the volume, because you're only going up one way. So now, as you can see, some of these volumes are going up and some of them are coming down. I've added a whiner to give it a bit of thickness. And the next thing we're going to do, which is an interesting one, is we're actually going to add ourselves a alligator. And we're not going to use a pattern on this. I'm actually going to control it using a compulsion, which I'll show you in a second. And with each of the, when I say that in compulsion, we can control the equivalent of these buttons being turned on and off. I'm going to have a bit of phaser sort of going on here as well. And here is the compulsion. So we just simply set our gates. We can have multiple gates going at the same time, so we can open up the filters at the same time. And this is the type of effect that I wish to go for. Big thing to remember is, even though we're sitting this on top of a combinator, we've got to make sure the alligator is enabled to receive notes, because this is sending notes out, and you can see the notes it's sending out. It's A, G and F sharps down on the 1. So you just literally set that up, and then that's how we can set this up. And the main thing I change, I think, when I'm playing around with compulsion, talking to an alligator, is the lengths of the signals I'm actually passing down. Well, the notes, they're actually notes I'm sending down, but obviously by changing the lengths you can do all kinds of things with them. Most of the cases they're basic. This is an interesting one because obviously I've tied the note together. So by the way, if it's fully up, it's equivalent to kind of doing a tie, but if it's up and there's nothing in the next one, it's not going to tie it to anything. But in this case, it's tied to the next note, but the next note's not full, so it means there's going to be like a double note in there. So that's what gives it that kind of sort of sound which is going on. And as I said, you can play multiple keys at the same, multiple things at the same time, and to give it that really nice, simple effect. And it is quite effective as well for a bit of white noise. So what we're actually going to play in a second is we're going to be playing Sweeper, and I'm using Sweeper purely as a envelope follower. I'm just going to let you hear what it sounds like. I'm actually going to deliberately turn it up loud so you do get a little bit more pumping. Going on, and I'll cut that background sound out. But I like to turn it down and have it really transparent. Only just affecting that a little bit. So what do? We add a sweeper, quite straightforward. We need to put it into bypass. It's probably the first thing I do because I don't actually use the sweeper functionality of it. Then on the back, I'm going to take the follower envelope out. And the way I've actually wired this up in this particular case is I've gone into a splitter so I can actually invert the signal. And that inverted signal, you can usually just take straight, say, to a level if you wish to play around with a level. That's what I'm wishing to do in my particular case. The reason I actually happen to have it going back into this merge, and as you can see, I've attenuated it right down, which means I reduce that signal right down, so it's only a tiny amount I'm actually adjusting, is because I've actually got another signal coming in which is affecting the overall volume, which I'll talk about a little bit later. A nice thing about using this attenuator here is what I find is I use this as my core setting, so this is really getting it really rough to where I want, and then I'll actually use settings on the frontal sweeper to fine tune it. As I said, you've got that gain knob, and you've also got nice control in this particular case over the attack and the release. So even though we've got the sound itself, which is pinging, and it's got a nice release on it, we've also got another release on that, which is just making it slightly longer. But to be honest, for this particular sound, it's only a little bit. So we just dial these in, and as I say, this gain now becomes my fine tune. I usually always tend to go for a very fast attack, and the release is something what you wish to play with, depending on what you're bouncing around with. Very, very straightforward. Over here, I've got another similar setup, but this time, instead of using the actual audio, so you can see everything else is set the same, I'm actually going to be using an envelope, and for the simple reason is this is actually obviously a kick which is going off, so obviously there's sweeper in the bypass, it's a kick which is going off. I don't have to worry about what that kick's really sounding like at all. All I'm interested in is saying, well, for the first part of that kick sort of sound, I'm actually going to go and duck, and there happens to be a bass. You can obviously adjust this envelope so it's not the full amount it's coming out if you don't wish. Don't forget we can attenuate this further down the line, which means we can turn it down outside of this setting. I just happen to be fine-tuning it, so this is my fine-tune. So outside, I'm playing with that button on the back, the knob on the back, so I can tweak it down, and then I can just fine-tune it by putting these down and up. And the other a little thing about the envelope, say over the audio, is obviously we can set our threshold on our trigger. So in my case is I've got this kick going, and a little bit later on I may manually pull this kick down in volume, and when it's dropped just below a certain amount, then this is no longer kicking in, which means the bass itself is going to come through fuller. You can obviously do that on the audio side, so obviously as I'm putting that down, this signal is going to be getting less and less and less, so it will be affecting the whatever instrument, in my case I say the bass, it'll be affecting that less and less and less. I just find this is a slightly better way for doing short sounds and for longer sounds, or for dirty sounds. So you could say this is good for dirty sounds and the other way is good for smooth sound. And what I mean by dirty sound is a sound which has got high dynamics in it is a bit dirty because it'd be going up and down and up and up and down. Obviously an envelope, you can make that nice and smooth because of that. With that ping sound, obviously it's a nice ping and it's coming down. Some vocals work quite well doing an audio follower, but again, on some vocals, because of the dynamics in that voice, you may find an envelope might work better as well. I'm using this mod panel because I'm going to be using faders, what I refer to as blindly. I'm going to be on my keyboard playing, say in a live situation, turning my faders up and down, and I'm not watching the screen, so I don't know exactly where the faders are. And if I was to take control of your box standard mixer faders, obviously I could easily overdrive them. So what I'm able to do is I'm able to set a maximum amount. So when I'm on my keyboard and I push my faders up, I can't overdrive these. These go to the full and they don't go any further. And that's the volume which I'm going to control the mixer channels with, so they can't be overdriven. To be perfectly honest, I've actually created sub buses, or sub mixes of my channels, so I could theoretically play around with the input gain. I could probably take -12 of that, so these could be pushed up right up to the maximum, and that would be like the equivalent of, say, being unity or something. Or I can obviously play around with that input gain as such that even though this fader could be, say, pushed all the way over to the very, very top, that's going to be the maximum volume. It's not the maximum volume of the actual mixing channel, it's what's coming in to what's coming out. And that's really what I'm doing here. I just find this a little bit easier to control from my controller. And so it's quite straightforward. You just take your faders out and you're going into level. And as you can see, I've actually attenuated these right down. So these are set around about 40, 41 is around about unity. So that'd be like a unity on the faders, which a lot of these are set very closely to. And the only reason these are more set to unity is because I say these are obviously submixes. So I've already done the mixing and I just happened to pump them into here, and I was playing around with my controller, and I just thought, no, actually, it's actually going to be easier for me to split my controller to control this, and then I can also use my controller to play instruments and all the rest of it at the same time as doing several other things. I just found it slightly easier to do. Obviously with the Nectars we can control the mixers, and we can also do things with instruments. Other people, you might not be able to do that, so this is a good workaround to control the mod panel. We control the mixes, which we can then control the volumes, especially in a live situation. And it's just a simple case of putting the wire across, and as I say, we just attenuate that value down. So on the front, you literally turn these all the way down, and this is now, as I say, by pushing these up, this would be like equivalent of moving these up and down. So this snare would be, that on full would be equivalent with that snare set in there, because obviously I've attenuated it down at the back. But because I don't have to worry about that, if I was live, it'd be like, oh, where am I stopping? I could easily, as I say, overdrive it, make it sound loud or not. So I just find this is a lovely way I can actually do it and know that if I push that fader at full, I do not need to worry. I'm not going to go absolutely mad or anything.